Can you hear me okay?
Following
Everything good?
is a I can hear you okay, sir. The following is a
Alrighty.
conversation between Drop the Mask Pod and Knocked Conscious. Together, they're consciously unmasked. They discuss free will. Next. Sir, how are you, man?
I am great. It's good to be here. I didn't realize we were live already. Sorry for talking over you.
That's okay. It's a whole point. But did you choose to talk over me?
I did not choose, and that's
You
that's
sure?
what we're talking about today, man. Free will. You sent
Well,
me
my
this
friend.
video of Robert Sapolsky talking about free will, and that sparked a whole rabbit hole of deep dives and back and forth, and we decided to talk about it today with you guys.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of people coming on here. I got to actually get into the comments section because I know that Justin will be joining us. We got a couple other people, but right now we're at 0. So we'll just wait till we get the first person on here, but we'll kind of warm it up, get it kind of zhuzhed. But basically, the general concept is, can we choose to do what we do? Or
Mhm.
is it already going to happen regardless of our choice? And just that question alone opens up the floodgates, man. Like you said, it was like I just came across this video, I sent it to you, and it's like rabbit hole time. And we just started diving deep into that rabbit hole. So we started
Yeah.
pulling up all kinds of stuff. So, all right. So, everybody who's going to be joining us, welcome. We really appreciate it. And, sir, would you like to start with the general portions of free will and how this goes, or how would you like to start
Yeah,
that?
man, I think we could start with why. Why does it matter? Because, when people do something, it's usually unexpected, or usually when it's unexpected, we kind of ask ourselves why. Why did they do that? What was the reason? We even do that to ourselves, which is another interesting concept when you think about it. And that in itself could spark a whole other conversation. Uh, we're asking ourselves why we did something, why we all do things we know are wrong or bad for us. We do things that make no sense. But what our brains will do is rationalize these actions after the fact. And I think if you paid any kind of attention to psychology or human behavior, if you listen to Scott Adams, for example, you've certainly heard that. That should not be a surprise, right? We agree on this so far, or anything
Yeah.
we're missing?
No, it's funny. I was holding up my finger because I cut my finger cutting a bagel yesterday, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I was cutting it in a very weird way because my girlfriend makes baked goods, like homemade bagels. Now, the
As
down
you should.
I would not even call it a downside, but the only difference is they are not the same perfect shape as like a donut maker. So they are bagel shape, but they're, a little thin up here or whatever. So I'm cutting it and holding it, trying to keep it even and level. I'm like, I'm going to gash my finger. I'm going to gash my finger. And I'm going slowly around. Sure enough, I gash my finger, throw down the knife. And I'm like, I knew I was going to do that. I knew that was going to happen. And there I am freaking out. There's a great example of, did I choose to do that the whole time knowing I was going to do that? I could have stopped cutting it that way and cut it a different way. So many different things, really. But I ended up doing exactly what I thought I was going to do regardless.
Yep, that's so was it free will? Did you choose to do that?
It's funny because I'm like, I need to stop cutting it this way. I need to stop cutting it this way. I've
But you
shared some
kept going.
stuff with you and I've shared stuff with you in before. And you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like when I go against my intuition, I've actually had like places where it's like, I need to change the lane and there's no reason for it, but there's like a
Mhm.
trash can up ahead. They're doing like trash day and it just happens to be like just sticking out. And I
Yeah.
hit it with my mirror. And it's like, son of a gun. I knew I was supposed to move over, but I didn't, kind of thing. And it happens a lot for me, but it probably happens to everyone. Phone calls, you pick up a phone or you're thinking about somebody, they call. Did you will that to happen? Did they will, you know what I mean? Like, how did those things happen?
There's a
So, yeah.
lot we don't understand, for sure. Yeah. There does seem to be some kind of precognition happening. So when we talk about free will, we kind of know that we're not always in control. I think we kind of all accept that to some degree, right? Not everything's exactly in our control, or at least it doesn't seem like it is. And I'm not ready to make a conclusion whether we have free will or not, but it does matter in the sense of how we understand each other, how we treat each other. Are people consciously making decisions that piss us off, or are they just wired to do what they do? And we should give them some grace. And we also know, I think this is pretty widely recognized and not controversial, that people's upbringing and culture play a big part in who you are as a person. There's always a battle between nature and nurture, right? Like, is that something you were born with, or was it something that you learned along the way in your life? But both of those things are largely on the side against free will. Like, neither of those things happen by your choice. So, is there something else going on that shapes who we are as individuals? What do you think?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So something you bring up, genetics and biology. We may have talked about it, but I definitely talked about in another podcast something about 57% of people would commit like were criminals even though they were like adopted and brought up in a different household. Like
Hmm.
it's just a slightly 51-49 leaning towards biology deciding kind of deciding is really hard to say, right? Because you're giving it personification of some sort, but compelling or driving that individual to be a certain way. And it seems to be just a little bit biological. Obviously, nurture would make sense. I'm sure we're going to bring this up, but Sam Harris talks about Hussein's son, right? It's like the dude was a bad dude. How did he grow up? He grew up as the son of Saddam freaking Hussein. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah,
it's also Saddam Hussein, and he grew up under Saddam Hussein. So like, just imagine just the how much that would be multiplied, for example. So
absolutely. So yeah, I don't think that's controversial at all. A lot of who we are is has to do with how we're raised. Some of it's genetic, some of it happened before we're even born. So again, both of those things really not in our control. So does that bring us to, do we have free will or not?
well, that's a little bit more loaded because this is just the nature nurture, right? That we're talking about actually going you as an individual meeting a situation where you have the choice and the means to make a different decision and you make a decision. And the question is, was that decision always going to happen regardless of what you thought? I mean, great example like is instinct. If you drop something, you reach to catch it. You don't even think you have zero. You realize that you caught it
Hmm.
milliseconds after you like looking at it in your hand already, and then your brain catches up and plays. Oh, you dropped it and you reached and caught it. It's like that stuff just it wasn't conscious yet, right? So,
Yeah. But when it does happen, then you feel like really good about yourself. You're like, oh, look at my reflexes. I'm so great. But really,
yep,
was it you? Was it, or is it something else motivating that action? Uh,
right.
that's what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the great point is, why does it matter? Like ultimately, why does it matter? Because I have some feelings about as we look at some of these philosophies, the way to like we talked about better for humanity, right? What's the best course of action for humans to be to each other, right? You and I have different ideas than some people who think government should have more of a role or something like that. But I look at some of these mindsets and I go, if this is what you think, the only way to fix something is through force. The only way to like fix it would be to actually like have to actively compel someone to do it. It's beyond
Yeah.
coercion, in my opinion. Like you're not going to coax them per se, if that makes
So
sense.
that action would certainly be removing free will if we had it in the first place. But then you got to look at that decision to coerce. Where does that come from? Is that
Was
something that they
it's
decided to do?
turtles all the way down, right?
Right. Right. So what are we talking about here? How do we define what free will is? Because that will kind of set up the rest of the arguments here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to put up something here Justin mentioned, but we did actually touch up on this. It is the nurture does have an act, but there are some studies out there that it's something like 56% or something. What it was you had two people who were twins, I think. one was adopted and one was raised under the father, like something like that, or they split them up or something, and there was still a criminality aspect to the father of the kids that were fostered or whatever. And it, is a pretty compelling information. I mean, 57 is a little more compelling, like 50.1. You know what I mean? 50.1 is like, okay, I don't even know, but 57, that's a somewhat of enough noticeable difference. I mean, it's more than the 10% difference between the two. So just a thought.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I would say, yeah, more than 50%. I could agree with that. Is nurture versus nature,
Oh,
but
no, this is a nature thing. Yeah,
oh,
it's
you think
actually
nature?
nature that determines. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
the crazy thing about it. Now, once again, I'll share the studies once we pull up this stuff. I just didn't think that would come up like this, but I should have thought about it earlier.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit beside the point. It does help us set up the premise here of what we're talking about, but I would say free will is just the ability to consciously make a decision, to think about it, think about what you're going to do, choose, actually make a choice for yourself, and then do it, right? Without
Right,
anything external forcing you. Is
right.
that a good enough definition?
I would think that's a great definition. Is once again, you have the means and the ability to make two different choices, and you choosing a different one than the one that you might be initially leaning towards would compel me to think there's some kind of will aspect to divert you from that initial thing.
Yeah.
But people argue against that. So like I said, we'll get into how, those
Yeah, we're
arguments.
gonna get into that. Free will is something that definitely we don't fully understand as humans. I think there is some amount of it. I think maybe. I'm still not sure, but what the limit is, I don't know. And it's not something binary. It's not like you have 100% free will or zero. Although, like you said, some people do think that. I think right now, I think it's not 100% free will. That I can easily get behind. It's probably like 99.9% not free will, but we'll see if we get anywhere on this.
Yeah. And I think to your point, being evolved animals, there are some instinctual things that I think would usurp free will regardless. We have some
Yeah.
instinctual things we just do.
Yeah, for sure. The instinct, but then at some point that was like a new thing to us, right? When you're a kid, everything's brand new to you. So at that point, it's kind of a choice. I think it's more of a choice. Again, you still have other factors, you still have instincts, some nature playing the role there, but you have to think about it more, right?
Yeah.
So you
And I
make
think
that
kids
choice, and
actually
when
just
you
have
see,
less restraints, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Like, so
right.
like they just do, and they whatever. Like, I don't know if you played the video, the thing about Bart Simpson with the ketchup packets. I don't know if you clipped that,
I
but
don't remember that.
basically there's like a Simpsons episode where where Bart just puts down ketchup packets and hits him with a hammer. It's like, dude, no adult like that's not in like a rage room or in like some place they know it's easy to clean up would just do that. No one would do that. But a
Yeah.
kid, why not? Like they're just because they're explorers. It's like a total different, but it is almost different because like once again the brain's not completely formed. So does
Mhm.
the complete formation of the brain mean that will happens? Is it only in humans? Like once again, these
Mhm.
are all the things we'll talk about today. So it's really exciting to get into.
Yeah. So, just a very basic example, something simple. I have one of those Nespresso machines at home, and I have coffee pretty much every day. And I choose which kind of pod that I want to put in the machine. I have a few different kinds, different flavors, different roasts, whatever that I can make. And it doesn't really matter what I choose, right? Either way, I'm getting coffee. They taste a little bit different, but I like them all. I don't buy the ones I don't like. But what drives the decision on what kind of coffee I take? I think I'm making a conscious choice, but I might choose one because I had the other one yesterday, so I want some variety. I might choose based on the taste. Like, why do I think that particular flavor is going to hit my palate just right in the morning? I don't know. The things leading up
Yeah.
to that are certainly not things I chose. Like, I might choose one because of the color. It's just striking the right senses at the moment. And that's where it starts to get a little murky. Like, why do I choose to have coffee at all? You know, I chose
Yeah,
to
it
try
does.
coffee
Totally.
at some point, but if other people didn't drink coffee and offer it to me, I probably never would have. So is that determinist? I don't think about all my
Right.
options for breakfast beverages and weigh the pros and cons. I just do it. Like, it's kind of a habit at this point.
Well, it's interesting in that way when you talk about coffee, like because coffee's harmless, right? But like I grew up with alcohol, so like
Hmm.
when teenagers were having a party, peer pressure is real big, right? I
Hmm.
chose not to drink, and I don't know if I chose not to drink, but there was a lot of pressure out there
Hmm.
to have a drink or a sip or something, you know what I mean? Like, but it just
Yeah.
wasn't my interest. So, did I freely choose to not do that, or was it just like it wasn't embedded or whatever? It was bound to be that way regardless, right? Coffee is interesting in that way because like some people drink tea because they grew up with their parents who drank tea in the morning. So it just seemed like a cultural, like there's cultural shifts and almost it can be kind of fluid in that way.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
we definitely are compelled. We're definitely influenced by outside things, but like when it comes to that, like peer pressure is a really great example of when, really you're going to say no. Like the natural thing would be the path of least resistance in nature would be to just go along with it, right? Like ultimately, even if it's bad for you, to be part of the pack would be like the most natural thing to do. So
Hmm.
why do we not smoke when the kid hands you a cigarette or whatever? It's like why do you not give into peer pressure? So that one just popped in my head. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, exactly, man. So, like, did your parents raise you to think that alcohol wasn't a good thing to do as a kid? I mean, and then what made them decide that? Is it just their experience? You're talking about being in a pack. Why do certain habits or traditions develop within a tribe or a pack? You know, you could say, oh, yeah, it's the group influence, but something started it at one point,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't
Yeah.
someone's decision. If you go all the way back to the beginning, did someone decide, hey, this is what we're doing now? Or was it
Right.
just like, how does that happen? We don't know.
I,
I don't know.
one that screamed to me before we even really dig deep is like the trans situation.
Mm,
It went from a point whatever percent to like a significant percentage. And you're like, where did that come from? Where
yeah.
like I can't imagine that not being a free will, non-deterministic cultural focus to actively make that happen. And I don't think that is a natural way that it would happen, right?
Hmm.
Like unless it maybe is because Camille Paglia talks about it in the Roman times and the Greek times that is the beginning of the end of a civilization. So we'll talk about that too. And I think we talked about cycles too. So, once
Yeah.
again, so many things, man. My head is like just going in so many directions.
I know this. We could probably spend a whole year talking about this and researching, but we did it in about a week. So we'll see how far
Yeah.
we get.
Yeah. Let's
So
see how
we
far we
know, right? Oh, you want to bring up this comment? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just putting it up in there, so no need to read it, but I will. Peer pressure, whichever way you decide it to go, can just be explained in deterministic was where if you felt your hierarchy of wants. And that would be sense like alcohol's bad for me, so I know that it's not good, so I know I shouldn't do it, so I won't do it. And that superseded the other desire of the people, being in the group was doing
Yeah.
self-harm or something. So, I
Yeah, but
think
you can
that's a
also
little
go the
more
other way. I
justified.
know alcohol is bad for me. I know it's poison. I know it's not doing me any good, but I still choose to do it. Right?
Right. Also, yep, I still, choose to yeah, I allow myself to have a drink on the weekend. I allow that for me, and I pour it out. I pour it exactly 2 fingers high, and I control it and you're like, "Do you now?" Every
Why that
Tuesday.
much? Why that amount?
E
Yeah.
e Right, exactly, like clockwork, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like where we get into habits and stuff too, right? So,
Mhm. Yeah. So, okay, back to kind of definitions, right? Like, we know we have consciousness, so we can think about our actions. We can kind of understand like what's going on a little bit. We can rationalize after something happens, but can we really control it? That's what we're going to get into. Um,
right. So should I play the first clip about self-discovery before we continue?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's do that one.
Yeah, just because we started talking about that before we jump before we jump it, because we're going to talk about consciousness next. We got a couple clips for that, but basically this is part of what is free will. Each choice is self-discovery, and this is the clip we're going to play for you.
Yes.
Every choice I make, and we all make choices. Determinism does not say that we don't make choices. It's silly. We are always making choices. Every choice I make, for me, is a moment of self-discovery. It's a moment when I reflect and think, I am the entity who is disposed to make this choice right now. Every single choice I make is a moment of self-discovery. It's an opportunity for self-insight. It's a revelation, a continuing revelation of what I am, what I truly am, which is not Bernardo Castro. And that's how I see meaning in the future. It's the first time that nature is discovering that it has those dispositions. It is the thing that makes those choices. Whether those choices are good choices or bad choices, particularly the bad ones tend to be more meaningful. When you make a self-destructive choice, reflect.
Yeah, so this guy, his name is Bernardo Kastrup. I found this on YouTube. He's one of the people that might fall into what we call the compatibilist. Compatibilist, what do you call it? Free will advocates or whatever. But basically, he's saying like free will and determinism are the same thing. And it's kind of a convoluted thing, kind of a cop out, in my opinion. But this is a good way to understand yourself, right? Like each choice you make is something that tells you information. And a lot of times tells you information about yourself. So you do something, instead of trying to rationalize why you did it, just think about it. Like think about why, ask yourself. And that will tell you something, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I love the way that is like a discovery. It's like, okay, so regardless of whether you made the decision or not, the made decision, he sees it as a discovery.
Hmm.
So to your point, it does work with the compatibilist, and we'll talk about the different styles, obviously, but it's
Hmm.
almost like a soft version of, you know, like a really light version of determinism, you know? So it's like, oh yeah,
Yes.
well, I knew I was going to make it, but I didn't know what the outcome was, what my actual decision was going to be. But I knew I was going to make the decision. So it's like, all right, so you
Hmm.
made it, but you didn't know what you were going to make. That doesn't sound as free willish, because like you got to know what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, I guess, or like, cover those bases.
Yes. Yeah. So Sam Harris, in his book, he has this line. He says, "The popular conception of free will seems to rest on two assumptions. One, that each of us could have behaved differently than we did in the past. And two, that we are the conscious source of most of our thoughts and actions in the present." And he says, we're about to see that both of these assumptions are false. So Sam Harris wrote a whole book on free will. He does not believe in free will whatsoever. um this is kind of the argument, like the idea that if you went back in time and rewound yourself to the same spot with the same knowledge and same uh, things leading up to it, you would always make the same decision. And maybe that's true. It sounds probable, right? Like obviously we can't test it, we can't go back in time. And once you've experienced something, you think you could go back and make a different decision, but that's because you now have the knowledge, the experience of that event, right, to learn from.
Yes.
So you might make a different decision if you still had the knowledge, but in the exact same situation, you'd probably do exactly the same thing. What do you think of that?
Right. Great points. And I think about that all the time because I had near death experience, and I wonder, should I have gotten in that car? Should I have gone to that thing? And people, there's always that question. If you could go back in time and do something different, and it's like, I do look at that one event as like very pivotal and monumental in my life. So like I can do that. But for the most part, you're gonna generally do a lot of the same things that you would do, I would think.
Yeah.
Now, it might change, like, if you fell into some money, maybe I'll go to an Ivy League school because it's like I can afford it, where you might take that off your plate. But that was also technically predetermined. I mean, literally, I mean, they're talking. It's interesting because, by the way, you can listen to Sam Harris's book if you have premium. Is it Spotify? Premium Spotify for free?
Spotify Premium, yeah. You can listen for free.
Yeah,
It's
so
pretty
it's like an
short.
hour and 15 minutes, guys. It's like an easy listen. But basically, I hate to say, but it's just too reductionist. It's just so reductionist to the point where, like, it's like trying to explain God. It's like the old, like, God's the invisible guy with the mustache and the beard, like, and it's a dude and it's an old man. And you're like, that sounds like a reductionist version of God. It's like Sam Harris's is a reductionist version of free will. But Sapolsky agrees with him, and he's deeply deeply well thought. So, what are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, on the book, it's not bad. I mean, we like to pick on Sam Harris a lot, and rightly so. But the book,
book's solid, but it's like when you have an hour to
good.
make your case and there's no counterpoint, it's not like a debate.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you start nodding because you're like, okay, his points he's making, assume this and assume that and this and that. And it's not, look, it's philosophy, man. This isn't a perfect thing. When you and I still don't know where we land on this, I think, at the end of this. So,
right. Yeah. So maybe we can go into more of the definition. So we've got libertarian free will, which is not related to a libertarian political philosophy, right?
there's no anarcho cap will.
Anarcho decision making. Yeah. So do you want to explain these? You got the notes on these?
Yeah, I do have the notes on these. So basically, libertarian free will is an indeterminism. Basically, from my understanding, there's nothing determinate at all. You make your decisions. Yes, they're causal. They create other things, and you react or whatever. But you still are completely within your full faculties. Then you've got your determinism, hard determinism specifically. This is where Newton, Brian Greene, I don't know if you clipped that with Brian Greene talking about each force, what the forces that make the will, and how each of them have been covered by some other physicist over time. Is like, well, it's not gravitation, it's not Newtonian, it's not the nuclear force, it's not the strong or the weak, it's not, it's not that. So it's interesting how we look at that. There's a reason I do want to talk, because I think determinism is it might be a psyop. No, that sounds weird, but it's just like physics has gotten steered off. Like Justin mentioned me, he sent me a Michio Kaku clip, right? And Michio Kaku for me growing up was like my idol, but like the string theory stuff, that's set physicists back like 20-30 years right now. We went down this weird path, just like the SSRIs with medical. Like, it's like someone captured the industry and intentionally diverted it away from the truth. So like Brian Greene and all these guys are chasing these ghosts in a weird way, even though they've got math to go with it. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's not brilliant, but it doesn't mean it's correct. Right. So like, I'm looking at all this stuff, and you got so many of these guys who are like, it doesn't matter. You're a criminal you were born. Actually, you weren't even born. Your parents had you born as a criminal before you were even conceived to them. And you're like, so then, what does it matter? Right. And we get to that. Anyway, the last one, compatibilism. It's like a cheap way to kind of like your point, this guy, I made the choice, but it is a discovery kind of. So, but I may not have made the choice, but it is new to me. So it feels that way. So these people try to combine the two, and look, it does make sense to have a little bit of that. We're seeing physics in a Newtonian way is very different than physics in a quantum way, and this opens up a lot of different questions about, is it the multiverse, right? Did you make every possible decision you possibly could have per quanta and the possibilities and the probabilities? Or, did you only make this one choice in this one chance that you had to make the choice?
Yeah, right. So yeah, we'll get into examples of those things. We'll talk about the physics. We'll talk about criminal implications. Things like that. We got a whole week's worth of stuff here for you, but we'll try to
Yeah.
condense it down to 2 hours.
So tell me something, Jason. Is
Yeah.
free will the same as consciousness? What are your thoughts on that?
So we are obviously conscious, right? And some people maybe more than others. That's another interesting take on it. But we're conscious of a very small part of things that are going on around us, and only a very small part of what's going on inside of us, even, right? We feel hunger, pain, sadness, happiness, all the emotions and feelings that humans have. And we have thoughts, right? But what we're conscious of is just a tiny piece of everything that's happening internally and externally. So, can we even expect to have free will when we cannot perceive the entire world around us and inside of us?
That's a really great question. I didn't really think about that way, but we are as conscious as we are. That's merely aware that we're aware, right?
Hmm.
But our eyes are limited to the visual spectrum that we have. Our ears are limited to certain frequencies. So imagine there's a thing hovering right here in front of me that I can't sense. That doesn't mean it's not there. I just
Hmm.
can't hear it or see it within my visual field and my auditory field or something, right? Like
Yeah.
these are real things that happen. So it, it just makes you question it makes you basically question everything, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, the
exactly.
consciousness, and that's the thing is consciousness to me. I had the pleasure of speaking with Bobby Azarian. He wrote The Romance of Reality,
Mhm.
and I think it's an emergent property. To your point, single cell become multi-cell, enough multi-cell, enough neurons fire. There's this pop, whatever that pop is. Now, I do think octopi and I do think dolphins are conscious. I think some are aware, but they're also limited for the fact that they can't harness fire, for example. So, like,
Mhm.
our ability to make our environment does give us a weird consciousness advantage that they may have gone a different kind of consciousness. Maybe they went with psychic ability, whatever, like telepathy or some other skill
Mhm.
that they have, cooperation, teamwork, whatever they would work for them. Does that make
Yeah,
any sense, or am I just babbling?
absolutely. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Just yeah, it's got me thinking. Maybe we go to this next clip.
Yeah, let's do it, my friend. We the O'Connor clip, right?
We all accept that one.
Yep.
And it's
Fascinating.
fascinating because, well, especially because most people intuitively know this to some degree, right? If you're having an argument with somebody, you might think to yourself, gosh, maybe I'm just hungry or hangry. Maybe I'm tired. You say, well, let's revisit this in the morning. I need to sleep on it. People are already aware that to some degree, there are moments in our lives where the decisions that we make seem to be out of accord with our own agency. So when asking, whether we have free will, everybody's going to agree that there are certain circumstances where we have less free will or more free will. There are certain times when our free will is diminished. And I suppose when the question is asked, well, where do we draw the line as to how far that?
All right. You're muted, my friend.
Sorry, the video cut off there. The end of it was where do we draw the line
Oh,
where that free will ends? Yeah.
yeah,
You should
it's a
bring up
little
Justin's
glitchy. Is it
comment there.
a little stuttery? So apologies on the technical issues.
Is the video smooth for you? Because it's kind of skipping for me.
Choppy for me. So I don't know
Okay,
if it's
so
a
it's not
stream from you to me, and maybe I should just put it directly on mine. I could try to play it directly if I want. I could try that. So that's
that's
not
fine. I think it's
not
good
the
enough.
worst. Yeah. So, yeah. So what are your
Justin
thoughts
said,
on that clip?
Justin says consciousness is the ability to know that you have awareness. Free will is the ability to choose between the things that you're conscious of. So yeah, I think that hits it right on the head. And that is the tricky part. Are we choosing things that we're conscious of? And the evidence for it isn't great. I'll be
No,
honest.
the more I delve into this, the more deterministic it is. But I just don't know if I can go 100. Right?
Yeah.
Like, but I had a different political ideology, and I didn't know if I could go like no government thought, you know what I mean? Like governance over government, for example. Like I didn't know that I'd be there politically, right? So compel me to change my mind, guys. I'm open. So like I know the more we delve into this, it's like the one I know we're going to come up to it, so I don't want to jump it. Yeah, but that's coming up next. We talked Alex brought it up about if you're not in the best mood for certain reasons, right? So, feel free to expound on that and share your thoughts on what I mentioned.
Well, I just want to say one more thing about humanity. Having consciousness clearly and maybe not having free will is kind of a cruel joke to whoever created humans, right? We're doomed to wallow in the consequences of our actions, but have no control to change them. That would be uh, quite a sad state of affairs. So it's difficult to make the leap to believe that there is no free will whatsoever. And that's why maybe I just like to believe that we have some control, even if it's not true. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because like these people are saying it's liberating. People are telling me that knowing that you don't have a choice is liberating.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, like liberation to me is the 180-degree antithesis of that concept. So it just doesn't sound liberating to me. And we'll talk about the challenges of that as well. But
Yeah. So yeah, we know a lot happens without us thinking directly about it. We do things like when you put on your shirt, you don't think about, okay, I need to raise my arm and then I need to extend and then I need to line up the hole of the sleeve with my hand and then put it in. You don't think like that. You just do it. It's unconscious, right?
exactly. 100%.
And definitely, if you've ever tried to convince somebody of a political opinion, for example, you know that it's a virtually impossible task because people aren't rational necessarily. So, free will is also a separate thing from making rational decisions.
Well, what's funny to that point is I remember one of our first podcasts that we did together, we had talked about that. We had talked about what was it? We think that you thought that people make or have the decision made, or they have the thing, and then they rationalize it going backwards,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So you're onto something there. You know what I mean? Maybe you're onto something there.
Yeah.
That's almost a deterministic way is we do it, and our consciousness reflects on what we did and
Hmm.
is a feedback loop. Now, that might change our action forward if we reflect, but that doesn't not make it deterministic because we would have reflected on it because we would have acted the same way anyway. And our
Hmm.
consciousness would have reflected on it. Once again, we start hitting repeat.
And our brains are kind of lazy, right? So like they look for the most efficient way to do things. And to do that, they set up patterns. They set up these neural pathways that when you're in this situation, you know to do this. You don't have to consciously think about it because that takes a lot of energy, right?
Yep. Yeah, and to
So,
that point is drive to work, right?
yeah.
How many times do you look down, you're like 20 minutes later, you're 3/4 of the way to work, and you're like, I don't remember getting in the
Yeah.
car.
Yeah. Highway hypnosis. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, it's a great
Right.
point too. So,
Uh,
all right.
so does
So
that mean there's
I'm
no
able.
free will?
Go ahead.
Does that then, is this an indication that we don't have free will?
Once again, I don't know because I feel like our consciousness reflecting on it does compel us to contemplate future acts. Like, I definitely know that's factual. I can't tell you that I made the decision or not, but I
Mhm.
can tell you I've reflected on decisions I've made. I felt
Yes.
shame, guilt, good, happy, proud. Like, I felt every emotion after a different decision that I've made.
Hmm.
And I certainly would think that as a contemplative human being would compel my actions to be different going forward because of that. But that, once again, that doesn't prove that it was free. it still could all just be causal deterministic, right? Like one action pushing the boulder down the hill. If all the same factors are the same, it should go down the same way every time. Should.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's still, I'm not convinced on the determinist side, because that so far only means that we certainly can make very poor decisions often, because there's no way that we can calibrate to every single factor involved, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I had to share some of that. Look, I share my religious ideology stuff, my thoughts and everything, but I also welcome everyone. We are an open platform to welcome all. Open your hearts to Christ and you'll experience love in its purest form. Zach shared with me his experience on our podcast when we had that little impromptu one-on-one. We kind of talked about stuff when Rechtenwald came on. It was beautiful when Zach shared how that worked for him. That was beautiful. So I just want to share that. Justin
Amen,
says
Zach.
amen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, man. But
Yeah.
back to the show.
Let's keep it moving. So we've got some arguments from neuroscience.
You want to do the quantum physics experiment?
Let's do the Libet experiment. Yes.
The Libet. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to try to play it from my computer. I downloaded it in the meantime. So hopefully this might work. We'll see.
Cool.
Oh, that's not the one. The Libet experiment, you said?
Yes.
All right. Let me try it from here. See if this works.
Put your hand in front of you and flex your wrist. You presumably first had a thought. Flex my wrist. That then caused your wrist to move. That's how it seems. But Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s have cast some doubt on that. In his neuroscience lab, he wired up subjects to an EEG machine measuring brain activity via electrodes on their scalps, and then asked them to choose to perform a simple hand movement when they felt like it. He also got them to record the time at which they made a conscious decision to move their hands. Disconcertingly, he found evidence of brain activity initiating the movement hundreds of milliseconds before the conscious decision was reported. In other words, his experiment seemed to show that the conscious decision didn't cause the movement. The brain activity bringing about movement started before the individual willed anything to happen. Some people think this is proof that free will is an illusion, that our conscious decisions are more like reports on what is already happening than the causes of our action. Libet didn't go that far. He thought that we might not have free will, but there's still time for what some have called free won't, a conscious veto of an action that is started in the brain. Others are more skeptical about the implications of these experiments. They point out difficulties of recording the time of a subjective decision to move, and question whether Libet's findings could apply to more complex conscious decisions based on reasons, such as the decision to reject the claim that Libet's experiments undermine our idea.
Good.
Yeah. So the free won't is an interesting concept. I think it's something worth exploring a little bit. So basically, there are things acting on us, but he wasn't going so far as to say that we can't reject those things, right? Those influences that, all the nature, the nurture, everything inside and outside of us that is supposedly forcing us into this deterministic decision. We do have some power to reject it. And that would mean free will, right? Free won't is actually free will.
Yeah. The choice to not say something is the same free speech as the choice to say something, right? So it's the same thing.
Mhm.
It is a will, right? But here's a great example. I get angry sometimes. A little bit. And everybody, the skipping video, I'm going to try to fix on the next one because I'm going to try to play it directly from my computer. I think we're bouncing through a couple channels, so that might be the problem. But hopefully that's the only problem, or it's StreamYard. And tisk, tisk, tisk. We shouldn't have free will chosen StreamYard. I should have deterministically chosen Riverside.
Riverside had its own problems.
Exactly. So, well, with this case, okay, the free won't thing. I've gotten angry before. I've taken my phone and I've wanted to throw it through a window. I look at the window, I change my mind, and I slam it onto the ground. Now, I know that phone is going to break. I know that because I am just fits of rage beyond anything. but I'll be damned if I'm going to throw it through a window. I've had that where I've literally stuttered and then just changed. I've done that. So I don't know what that is. Is it that the will to do it, but then the consciousness reflected changing it and it's still deterministic? Like, was it that in one act? You know?
Yeah, I still don't know, but definitely you have thoughts all the time, right? Things you want to say, things you want to do. You want to break out into a fit of rage and strangle somebody, but you don't, because you
Road
know what's going
rage.
to happen.
Right.
But
all
then is
those
that
kinds of things.
decision something that's already wired into you? Because some people have those thoughts and then they actually do it. And is that their fault? Is it because they're bad people?
Well, once again, if they were always going to do it, the glob of cells that are the being, you know what I mean? It's not fault, but like they're responsible as in a cultural sense, right? And we'll probably talk about that, right? Responsibility in the thing and the part of it. So
Mhm.
that's an interesting conversation as well. So, do you want me to try the quantum physics one from my computer this time?
I think I want to skip that. Can we? Because
Okay.
since we were
Yeah.
talking
Go to the
about
hungry judge.
the bad people, let's go to the hungry judge.
Okay. Yeah. Do me a
We'll come back
favor.
to
Why don't
physics.
you set this up while I download it really quickly? Cause I just have to add it to my clip here.
Okay, so yeah, good example to demonstrate the external effects of things that play into our decision making. Right? You have a judge; they're supposed to be these neutral arbiters of the law, which already has its own problems. But we'll see in this clip here another big problem with it that maybe we don't think about.
Yeah. So let me pull this up and here we go. Hope this is better, everybody.
Tell me about the hungry judge phenomenon.
Yes.
Oh, I love this one. This one is in the realm of like what's been going on in the previous hours. And this was this classic study published in a very prestigious journal looking at all of the parole board decisions that were made in a particular country over the course of a year, and hundreds, possibly thousands, I'm forgetting. And, at each juncture, a judge either let somebody go free or sent them back to jail. And the scientists looking for what were the predictors of the decision. And they found like the single most powerful one was how many hours it had been since the judge had eaten a meal. See a judge right after they had lunch, you had about a 60% chance of parole. By 3-4 hours later, essentially a 0% chance. Whoa, what is that about? That's totally bizarre. That makes total biological sense because, like, the part of your brain that is required to think about the world from somebody else's perspective, to challenge your immediate snap judgments a second time, a fifth time, a 10th time. It's part of the brain. The frontal cortex is the most expensive part of your brain metabolically. When it's been hours since you've eaten, your blood sugar levels are low. And what's one of the first parts of the brain that's beginning to get a little sluggish as a response? This part of the brain, and it's easier to default into a quick snap judgment.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, what do you think, man?
Hangry, man. Don't get hangry.
Isn't that crazy? Like your fate depends on the judge having eaten within the last 30 minutes or so. That is insane.
Imagine you this and you're like, I'm going to schedule after lunch, and something pushed it and they had to push you right before he was going to eat lunch. And you're just like, I can't go to sensing. I gotta wait. I gotta wait an hour. I just gotta wait an hour. Imagine that. We think these people are totally partial. And I think later in that clip, right? We're not going to share that, but Snickers has run a whole advertising campaign on hangry, right? Turns him different celebrity, and Alex brings that up to Robert, and like Robert's such a nerd, he doesn't even know that that's a thing. But he's like, "What? They made a commercial like that? That's brilliant!" Because he knows that is exactly like such what we are.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. But one thing that he does say is like, knowing that the part of your brain that makes those decisions, he says, uh, is affected by hunger, well, that means that you are at least somewhat making a decision, right?
Right. And
So,
I can speak to that. Remember, I weighed 315 pounds, guys. Okay. I was going to eat myself to death. I'm not kidding. When John Candy died at 43, I'm like, I can beat that. I'm not kidding. I had a death wish. Okay. But at some point in my life, I just said, trust me, I'm hungry right now. I'm hungry all the time, but I fight all day to do that. Now, I know it's better for my health to not eat than eat, like, because I'm so big. But it's almost unhealthy to the point where I'm almost deterministically opposite not eating. But I had to do that to fight that other urge to eat so badly, right? So did I just do a 180? Did I just use the same psychosis about eating like I used to just not eat?
did something happen to you that made you
Right.
change your mind about wanting to be thin, or what?
Right. Yeah. And all these things come into play, but it's like, is it worth it to me? What's the value to me to do that? Like, on it, what are all those things at play? Is it my girlfriend that I wanted to be with her longer? Is it that I felt not so good? Like, it's so many factors go into it, but like, I can tell you, I had to actively fight every urge to eat. So I
Mhm.
just would starve myself because I'm like, I have fat storage. It will go away. I have fat. I had to just mantra myself into it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So on the criminal thing, Sam Harris's book, to go back to that, he starts with a story about two career criminals who broke into a house and proceeded to do terrible things to the family that they found inside. Very, very disturbing things that I don't really care to discuss, but it ends with them setting the house on fire with people still tied up alive inside. You can go read it if you like, or go listen to it for free. But the purpose of the story is to try to understand the motives. And so perhaps what we see as a society ought to do with to hold these people responsible, it differs depend on how we view free will, right? So the criminals had a history of abuse themselves, and we know that that can often lead to perpetuating that abuse as adults. I think that's pretty well recognized, wouldn't you say?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So the question is, was this just a choice that these men made because they're bad people, or was it something predetermined inside them?
Right. And what was interesting, remember, I think when they talked about why did you just set the house on fire and not do anything about the people inside? And you're like,
Yeah.
it didn't occur to them.
Yeah. Like they didn't even
Like,
think about it, right?
and 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 like I do get that. I people look, human diversity, like intellectually, biologically, there's a huge range, man. There's a huge range. And the military doesn't even accept people below a certain IQ, for example, because they can't point the gun in the right direction. Okay. And that is an unfortunate thing that one is born like that. Okay. And we must care for all people who can't, who need help, right? Like that's a true personal thing that I would want my community to do. That said, not everybody has all capacity. So like when
Hmm.
you when we talk with these intellectuals, 150, 160 IQ, I hate to use IQ, it sucks, but it's just one of those things. Like these guys are talking to levels you and I are hurting to reach. Imagine
Hmm.
people who would just set a house on fire without thinking about who's inside. Imagine how much they can understand these concepts, right?
Hmm.
So like not only is it whether these concepts are real or not, is like, can people even grasp what these things mean too? Because there's implications if we think that it's one way or another, just like a religion. If you have a faith, it has you act certain ways, right? Or it
Hmm.
compels you at least to act certain ways, which maybe are not be free will. Now we're back.
We're kind of going in circles around it here, but
You want to pull the
that's
weight clip, or where are we at?
well. One more thing from Sam Harris. He has a passage in there about this incident that he says, "I cannot take credit for the fact that I do not have the soul of a psychopath. if I had truly been in that guy's shoes on that day, that is, if I had his genes and life experience and an identical brain or soul in identical state, I would have acted exactly as he did. There's simply no intellectually respectable position from which to deny this. The role of luck, therefore, appears decisive. How can we make sense of our lives and hold people accountable for their choices given the unconscious origins of our conscious minds? So there's a handful, right? How do we hold people accountable? And do you think Sam's right? Do you think that if you were in the identical situation, I mean, I guess he sets it up in the way that is unfalsifiable, right? He sets it up and says, if I was the exact same person in the exact same situation, well, yeah, you probably would.
Yeah, if I was the boulder in the same conditions.
Yeah.
And once again, just quickly, Sam loves to do that.
Yeah.
Assume all my things I'm telling you are true. Here's my conclusion based on everything that I told you being true. It's like,
assume COVID actually did kill a lot of
right.
people.
That's I didn't want to do it, man. You had to do
right.
You had to get us banned on YouTube, you son of a bitch.
Sorry, man.
Damn it. We were so close.
I couldn't control it. It was out of my control.
Yeah, right. Did you have free will? Did you choose that? Did you choose to sabotage us?
No, and YouTube has no control whether they choose to censor us or not.
So I can tell you this. I have an older brother by 3 years. He and I are eerily similar in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Our reaction to things, how we, whatever. He and I have different life paths, but I can almost guarantee if I was the firstborn and he was born 3 years after me, that I really feel like I'd be in a similar situation to where he's in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does leave a lot of space, or not space, but it should leave us with a lot of sympathy for people, right? Because, yeah, a lot of that stuff that led to you being in those situations was out of your control. And maybe at some point you did have a decision to make, and that was wrong, but we have to have some compassion here, right? It's not people's fault that they grew up with abusive parents. It's not people's fault that they, maybe grew up poor or something. Like, I had decent parents. We certainly weren't rich or anything, but because they went to college and they valued education, so did I, and I ended up in a pretty good spot. That wasn't me. Like, I don't really take credit for that. I got lucky, Yeah.
And same thing. My upbringing, I'll say privileged. Sure. My parents were not privileged. Okay. My parents are naturalized American citizens from Germany. Like, they were born in 40 and 44. There was no privilege there. Being in America for the opportunity to make a life was the privilege. Yeah. I got that privilege. Thank goodness that I got that. So, to your point, so blessed to be here. But this is cool because it does allow us to actually talk about these things, and maybe we can bridge the gap, to your point, between like people who don't understand the concept, people do. Like, Tom Petty's a great translator for Bob Dylan because he speaks like half Dylan. So, like, if I can get Dylan to talk to Petty and then Petty to talk to me, I can understand Dylan, right? That's like pretty much how it is. So this is how we kind of bridge it. So we need to take, like, we're privileged to be here. Now, I will tell you, at 40, I didn't want to be here anymore, and I sought help. I wasn't coerced. I took myself and dragged myself to see someone to make a change that I wasn't happy with in my life. Once again, that doesn't mean it was free. But it doesn't mean that I reflected on what was going on and compelled myself to make that decision, I would think. So almost like the consciousness being a feedback loop, like we were saying, maybe compels action. That doesn't not make it deterministic, as long as your consciousness, you know what I mean, is the feedback. But without the consciousness, I don't think the free will part works that way.
Yeah, I mean, you get feedback either way, even if it's not conscious. Like, if you feel pain, I guess you consciously know you feel pain, but something happens to you.
I get what you're saying.
there's all kinds of stories where like things are stored in your body. Basically, it's kind of an analogy, not literally stored in your body, but you'll have like reactions, instinctive reactions based on your experience that do not cross your consciousness. Does that make sense?
100%. Absolutely. And to your point, we're talking about, are these people to blame?
Yeah.
Like, and that'll come. Are we going to get to that a little bit later as well? Because
Well,
we're kind of asking the question, right?
Yeah, we're asking the question. I don't know if I know the answer exactly, but looking at this kind of stuff, it does make me pause and think maybe they're not so much to blame. And when you look at our criminal justice system, it's set up in a way that understands free will, that we have free will, right? That you just made a choice and we're going to incentivize you not to make these choices by punishing you, right? And that kind of maybe doesn't make sense. So maybe we should actually get to another clip here. Let me.
Yeah, the weight clip.
Not the weight one. The.
Okay.
Where did it go?
Better world without
reward and punishment. Do you have that one?
I didn't download that one yet. Let me pull it up. All right. Do you want to set it up while I download it? Reward and punishment. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. So just what we're talking about. With the criminal stuff, does it make sense to punish people for bad actions? Does it make sense to reward people for good actions? Do we call people great because they made the best choices and did something good in the world, right? That's kind of what we're talking about here. So this is Sapolsky again. Right. He's going to talk about it.
Yeah. So, and to your point, once again, it's like, yeah, do we also reward these people for being in the position that accepted the lack of the will? Right? Like,
yeah, right.
You know, all these things are like very important on how we look at that. So yeah, let me play that clip for you.
All right.
Now, if you're right that all human behavior is a result of a similarly sort of a process that's similar in the sense that you don't have control over it, then this leads to quite a radical conclusion that we should probably adopt the same approach to essentially anybody doing anything any of the time. Is that your position?
Exactly. That's the only logical extension. It's the only intellectually honest and ethically honest conclusion to reach, which is this completely nutty stance that blame and punishment as virtues in and of themselves rather than as instrumental tools, blame and punishment never make any sense whatsoever in any realm of human life. And holding a mirror up to that, likewise, praise and reward never make any sense whatsoever, because that's the circumstance in which some people are treated better than average for reasons they had nothing to do with, as opposed to the world of people being treated worse than average for reasons that blame, punishment, reward, praise, a sense of entitlement, a sense that you have earned anything, a sense that hating a person is ever justified. None of those make any sense whatsoever. And in principle, you need to run the world without any of that stuff.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. I don't know if I'm on board with that completely, in the sense of like, are you better than other people for making good decisions, or are you worse for making bad decisions? No, maybe it doesn't make sense to reward good behavior or punish bad behavior, right? But the reward does serve a function. And you see this is like, if you hear about dog training at all, positive rewards are much better influences on creating good behavior. So as a training
and negative
mechanism,
reinforcement isn't actually like beating a dog. Like a lot, just to be clear, a lot of people think negative reinforcement is like actually like doing something negative. No, it's taking away a reward, by the way, just to be clear, philosophically speaking. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And they say that the positive reinforcement works a lot better. So people being animals, I think that does serve a useful purpose, especially parents towards their children. That's where it's appropriate, right? You want to train your children to be good people and make good decisions to whatever extent they can. Does that make sense? So I kind of disagree with the premise here. There is a place for reward and punishment, I think.
There is. And can we just say accountability? Like,
Yeah.
why don't we just do accountability versus blame? Like I blame that guy for murder. Okay, like, no, that man, okay, do you want to pacify it? Fine. He's accountable for that person's non-existence anymore, for that person's death. He's accountable for that. There has
Mhm.
to be something. I
Yeah.
don't know
Right.
what, though. I really don't know what. But the problem with Sapolsky is at the end of that, he goes, there should be none of that. And I'm like, how do you force none of that? Like
Mhm.
you're for, you know what I mean? It comes down to force. How, like, hey, let's get rid of the migrants. Okay, great. Would you like to give up your Fourth Amendment right to go through everybody's house to look for migrants in your attic? Does that sound like a thing you'd like done? You know what I mean? I'd say no, right? So like these things can't happen from these deterministic people. This is one of the problems is like, first of all, it absolves you of all responsibility in some weird way. Like
Mhm.
minor attracted persons. No, dude, you are a pedophile. Okay. Now you can have any thought you want in your sick little freaking demented head, but you act on it. And now it's a different game. It's a
Mhm.
different game, right? I don't care if that's determined or not.
Yeah.
My animalistic emotion will not allow that.
Right. Yeah. In a sense, it doesn't matter whether it's deterministic or not because
Right.
you committed the thing, right? If you're a violent criminal, there must be something people do to remove that threat, right?
Right.
And
And how
we
about
could talk about,
repentance?
yeah,
What about people who turn their lives around?
yeah,
You know, I mean,
that's
like,
another thing
look,
too.
Ross Ulbricht was in prison for 12 years. I don't know how different he's going to be coming out, but he was doing a lot of stuff in there, you know what I mean? Like that kept him motivated or whatever. So like there are epiphanies that happen. You reflect sometimes, right? There no ability to change? And is that change predetermined?
Mhm.
Man, it's really hard. It's really hard to say that, right?
Yeah, it's really
Hey,
hard.
Billy, get in the car. We're going to do another drive-by. I just got out of prison. Well, yeah, but we're going to do another drive-by. That's like what we do. We're scorpions, right? Like, well, maybe I don't want to be in prison again. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I don't know. It's hard to say whether that's deterministic or not. But once
yeah,
again, I do think that feedback of the consciousness reflection can influence future actions, if that makes sense. That might not be
absolutely.
free, but I think that's how part of it works. So,
Yeah, and Aaron makes a good point. Who's accountable for the training of humans? A keeper of brothers? Yeah, I mentioned parents. That's one way. And there's always going to be some kind of social norm, social system where these things are learned. I don't think you can escape that.
right. And who teaches them, right? In different
Yeah.
cultures, like right now, we've had, for example, our education system is completely captured in it's captured in certain ways. Arizona's not so bad, but it's captured in a lot of places in a lot of ways. And that's outside the parents, where they're not even letting the parents know if these kids like want to be something or
Mhm.
like the California law, the AB 1955, whatever that I talk with Amy Bond of Perk about. It's a crazy law where it's like you don't even get to tell the parents. You're like, well,
Yeah.
I would argue the parents had the kid. I know there's really not great parents out there. I really do know that. And
Yes.
those to those that we know that that's happening, that needs to be addressed. But that doesn't take de facto the government knows what to do, so we can just take the kids to do, you know what I mean? So like that whole that's where it gets scary is who's going to impose the can't let them
Hmm.
if it's
Yeah, and who's
you
to
know what I
say
mean?
what the proper training is?
Right.
I would say
Right.
definitely not the government, at least. I don't
Right.
know, and it's never going to be perfect. But
Right.
yeah,
Well,
parents
I look at it this way.
should be
Did you
priority.
see the BAM? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go
Finish
ahead.
your point. I apologize.
That was it.
Oh. Did you see the baboon thing with Sapolsky? Did I share that with you? The 9-minute clip?
You might have, but I
Okay.
couldn't watch them
So
all.
basically the reason it's kind of sprung this. It was like the second clip I saw, so I probably drowned you in clips. So basically it was a 9-minute video clip. He worked with baboons and he's talked about it throughout his like, through the podcast and stuff. What
Mhm.
happened was the most aggressive males in the baboon, it was top down, right? Hierarchy. You had the alpha males who got everything, but they were antisocial, aggressive, blah, blah, blah. They got into some bad meat, some tainted meat at a resort park, in a trash can, some like tuberculous meat or something. All the aggressive one died, and all the passive, mild-mannered males were like, got all the females who were like nice guys, like totally change the culture of that tribe. And I'm like, so wait, you're gonna cull everyone to make this thing like what? So okay, this guy's deterministically nice guy. Well, who determines that? And what are you gonna do? Cull the ones who don't? Like, I totally get that
Right.
happened naturally in the wild, but how could you do that with us, right? Or you know what I mean? Once again, it's like
Yeah.
the concept sounds great. How do you execute it? Oh,
You'd
through
have to
execution.
you'd have to go through a Brave New World type scenario where everybody is raised in a single environment, 100%
Yep.
controlled.
100% controlled, and we
Yeah.
control everything, amount of oxygen, everything, right?
Yes, right. Right. Well,
What do
let's
we
get
got, my
into
friend?
another example. Keep this moving. The weight.
Okay.
You talked
The weight
about
one?
weight. Yeah, so
Yeah,
let's get into that.
absolutely. Let me share that one for you, sir.
Back to Sapolsky. He's going to be talking about how weight is just out of humans' control.
Yeah.
The fact that if you get a certain variant of the gene coding for the leptin receptor in your brain, no matter how self-disciplined you are, no matter how much you actually love yourself no matter what you do, you're going to be overweight because your brain doesn't get satiation signals. And when you look at sort of implicit biases in society these days, one of the only ones that has grown stronger in recent decades is implicit biases against people who are overweight, because we associate it with lack of self-discipline and self-indulgence, and they secretly don't love themselves at all. And you get that gene variant and you're screwed. You can't do anything about it. And it's going to be a much better world when we subtract free will out of that one.
Yeah, what do you think about that, man? I'm
Please
still
share
having
your
some
thoughts.
doubts.
Yeah, please. Oh, you want me to go first while you're processing, or?
I'll go ahead. I just have some doubts about this. Yes, there's a lot of things that are out of your control. You can have genetic factors. You can grow up in an environment where the health is not prioritized. So yeah, to a large extent, people's weight is not in their control, but we see all the time people making a conscious effort to change. And then I guess you could go back and say, well, that conscious or that thought to want to change didn't come from you. It came from some media you consumed, some incident that happened to you. People get scared when they have a health incident. They go to the hospital for a heart attack or something, and then they're like, oh, okay, now I got to change. So where do you sit on this?
I did share a little bit about my weight thing, and yes, people have thyroid disorders. Yeah, a percentage of people can't process lactose, right? These are genetic mutations that happen in our lives, like these created things. But what the way he says that is excusing to shove your face full of 5 Big Macs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are very helpful going, hey, look, you got a weight problem, but what are you doing? Okay, you're exercising, you're eating as well as I would think within the portions of whatever, and you're controlled in that way. Now, some people might have the thing where they just can't be satiated, I guess, gluttony or whatever. Okay, that's a slightly different, but that's such a small percentage. These are things within the communities, right? That are just normal things. Like what you're not gonna, you know what I mean? Like lactose intolerance. Oh yeah, you're lactose intolerant. I can't mate with you, or you know what I mean? Like, okay, so there's probably, I would argue that unless it's a male or female genetic disorder, that a similar percentage of men and women would have that. Maybe they find each other and they're okay with that because they have that understanding and they still mate, right? Like, what are we talking about here? I'm trying to understand. It's like, you can stop or control the things you put in your mouth, the amounts. Maybe your processing doesn't work, but that doesn't it excuses, oh, everybody's obese now. No, not everybody was obese. Okay. As someone who's a fat fuck for like 30 years, no, it's just not the case. Like, and weight is one of the ones where you just look at it. It's like, I know a woman who had a thyroid problem and she was overweight for her size. She ran marathons. You think I couldn't walk 5 miles and she ran 26. It's like, okay, well, I think, you know what I mean? Like, there's grace. Like, humans have grace. I don't know. I'm going crazy.
Yeah, and running a marathon is often called like a triumph of the will, right? Because at every point, your brain and your body is telling you, why the hell are you doing this? This is insane. And you want to stop the whole time, but you're like, nope, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going.
Is the will the glory, or is the determinant the glory? I would argue that I would argue that not everybody has the same determinants to do that. I don't want the glory of saying I ran a marathon. I don't give a crap personally. I think it's amazing that someone does. It's just not my thing, right? So once again, is it how we're born and how we do it that makes our drive? And you know what? I think there's ambitious rich kids, just like we just see the ambitious poor kids do real well because they don't ever want to lose again or struggle. And we see rich kids get entitled and maybe like not put themselves that forward because they got coddled a little bit. So there's a nurture there, right? And you see these people with willpower that came from nothing, you know. Adam Caroll's a great example. He sees his mom laying on the couch. He goes, I don't want to live that way. It sounded like he was determined, and I think it was his will. I don't think it was, I think it was like literally that. So anyway.
Yeah. I'm still on the side of free will, I think. But okay, let's say going back to kind of the criminal stuff and maybe weight too. No, I think just the criminal stuff. Like, you see people who commit violent crimes generally are not particularly high on the IQ scale. And we've talked about this a little bit before with IQ, but what do you think? Like, IQ might not be a great measurement for intelligence, but there's something about the variance in your brain activity, right? The amount of processing power you have in your head, that I think at least it gives people a greater or lesser degree of conscious thought. Like those people that burned the house down and committed the violent crimes, like they said, I didn't even think about why I did this. It just didn't cross my mind. So they're not maybe as conscious as people that might be higher on the IQ scale. What do you think?
Great point. And we talked about it. You're limited, right? Limited. But here's the rub. And I don't know the number, but I also think that these people would get off more than poor criminals who can't afford defense. What about all the white collar crime? How many fucking psychopaths and narcissists and megalomaniac politicians have freaking gold bars in their house and $100 bills shoved in their robes that are embroidered? Like, it's just a different crime, but the crime, you know what I mean? Like, it's the crime within the means that they can do it, right? Like, it's the dumb guy, the moron's not gonna do a smart crime. So he'll just do a crime. So maybe it's the criminality inside the brain, not how they process the criminality.
Yeah,
because the limit is
certainly smarter people can't be criminals, but to do that kind of thing that with the violence where you just don't care about human thing, I guess there are also very smart, like psychopathic serial killers too. So maybe it's not
but
perfect.
Your point is that reptile brain in the back of your head, right?
Yeah,
there's a base carnal effing and fighting. Right? Lower IQ, effing and fighting. Look at the countries and look at IQ and look at the stability in those regions that have those IQ correlated IQ numbers. And it's pretty weird that
But a
it's
lot of
very
those
unstable.
psychopathic people are smart. They have consciousness. They know what they're doing. They just don't feel bad about it. They don't have the guilt.
Right. That's a
You know?
totally different kind. Yeah.
Yeah, different thing. So
And
I'm just
that's
wondering, is
curious
this?
if that's a biological thing too, or if that's cold. Like we still
Yeah,
totally wrestle with that one.
yeah. I
Anyway,
think
go
it's
ahead.
probably largely biological, but also triggered by nurture.
I think it's a break
Um,
for sure somehow. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so is this also correlated to free will? Are there variances in how much free will you have based on your brain processing power or whatever measure you want to say about intelligence? Do you think it's correlated? I think it might be.
Well, Michael Malice. By the way, Michael Malice is coming to Freedom Fest, y'all. Palm Springs, Michael Malice. Oh my God. I'm gonna get like within 50 feet. I'm be like, I'll play hard to get. He'll come to me. Sure. Anyway, Michael Malice said the smartest dogs are used to train. So I think there's a point where, and I think you and I are at like eclipse that, where we like get into the Peterson philosophical, where we take steps back outside of ourselves and look down and reflect. But there's that midwit range. It's like they're smart and they grasp concepts, but then they just grasp onto the concept and don't have a deeper, but they have just enough to be dangerous.
Mhm.
That's probably most of us. I'm included in that. I dip in my toe into like, what's that, mass psychosis, mass formation psychosis every once in a while. But you
Mhm.
and I, we can argue that we're a little different, considering COVID happened and how we reacted and responded to that as best we could. So we have the capacity to step outside of the norm. And I do think there's a correlation between that. Now, for the psychopath serial killer, it does allow them to rationalize every decision they make that's evil.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
right.
with that, I think a smart evil person is a lot more dangerous than a dumb evil person.
Yes, agree with that, and for sure. And it's not like I'm trying to say I'm the smartest guy. I'm still a dumb human. And I would say that if there is any variation in the amount of free will that you have on the scale, it's not like a 90% free will to 10% on the low end. It's like the smart people might have a 1% free will, and the dumb people have like 0.5%. So it's still a very small thing.
I just want to share, who's to say proper training system, right? To your point, like who's to
Yeah.
say
Yeah, I
what
read that
the
one.
things
Yeah.
are. Yeah. And then I did want to share a Justin point as well. That's what they say about children. They seem to be a whole lot crappier these days than they used to be. Yeah. I mean, there's a discipline aspect, right? Culturally, there is, right? But
Mhm.
that does that have anything to do with will or not? You know what I mean? Was it determined that, once again, maybe this is probably a good time, right? There's a
Mhm.
book called The Fourth Turning with Neil Howell. Okay. It's a brilliant book, but it's talking about, what is it? Strong men create good times. Good
Mm.
times create weak men. Weak men create bad times. Bad times create great men, or some strong men, right? There's like this
Mm.
cycle.
Yeah.
So this is the cycle. We're on the fourth turning of this four generational thing, whatever it is, 80 year, whatever. It's kind of a contratif semi-war cycle, whatever. Humanity, it repeats itself, right? We constantly say it rhymes, it repeats itself, history repeats itself, it rhymes or whatever. And then we're like, humanity repeats itself. And you're like, well, is that almost, does the cycle almost help with the deterministic factor of it? Because here's your growth. It's going to crest,
Mhm.
it's going to go down, then it's going to go back, and it's going to go back up, and it just does that. That's just what it does.
Yeah.
So does the cycle that we're kind of experiencing, that we're starting to see emerge out of history,
Mhm.
the being repetitive, it almost lends itself to more of a deterministic than free will, because we can't seem to steer out of these things once we do them, because we tend to do them again.
Yeah, there's something to that. I think when you look at the societal level, the aggregate or the average of people, you can kind of predict what's going to happen. And this is like kind of how insurance works. Like car insurance companies say they don't know what you as an individual are going to do. They don't know if you're going to speed or get into a car accident. Maybe with some history, they can make an educated guess, but they don't know what the odds are of you. Well, they know the odds. Sorry, they don't know specifically when you are going to get into an accident and require a claim, right? But when they have a whole bunch of people, when they have a million customers, they can predict pretty accurately how many accidents are going to happen in a given period, right? So there's something at that level where, as a society, we get into these cycles. We're kind of doomed to repeat these cycles, and maybe that's partially determinism, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Where are we at on this? Because I don't want to jump the gun, because I wanted to talk a little bit about psychic phenomena, but that'll probably be at the end, I guess.
Let's go to physics.
Yes, let's go to you. What do we got, sir?
So yeah, people that make the argument for determinism often reference physics, and kind of treating people as a collection of cells and particles and electrons and whatever. I don't know about it, but I think it's worth exploring. So if
All
we
right.
got that, if you got that clip, what does physics say about free will?
Physics say? Yeah, give me 1 second. What does physics have to say? Give me 1 second. I'll download that. I'm looking at the notes, and I'm just not following the notes, sir. I'm trying. My eyes are
We're all over the place.
one
We
of those
kind of went
days.
out of order.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. No worries. No, it's totally good. Everybody having a good time in the chat? Give me 1 second. I'm downloading this. Give us some thumbs up. Hey,
While we're
everybody
downloading,
needs to subscribe to Jason's podcast at Drop the Mask. So let's make sure we do that. Subscribe, join, all that good stuff. Here we go. I'm going to
at
present
Drop
this
the
guy.
Mask Pod for me on X. Mark Sean
Amen.
Pulse for Mark over there. Go follow him.
Yeah.
Not Conscious Podcast. Justin says,
so
I think that has more to do with the nature of man and less to do with the things being determined.
Interesting.
Yes.
Nature of man.
But then is the nature of man determined? I guess that's the question.
Right. Well, and that is the thing, because how many times where we go, hey, don't become imperialistic, don't become an empire. We've had 3 or 4 of these iterations of that, from Greece to Rome
Screw
to
it. I'm doing it anyway.
right to England. I mean, we literally broke away from the empire that we replaced as an imperial empire. Like, all right. Anyway, let me.
Anyway, this is that green guy. I forget his first name.
Yeah, Brian
Green.
And once again, he's one of the guys I think's part of the PSYOP, everybody, that steered physics off. So it's like, it's really weird, this deterministic, because I think that determinism is some kind of ploy to do stuff, if that makes sense. So anyway, I will hit play.
What does physics have to say about free will?
Well, it's not definite because we don't fully know the laws of physics, but the laws of physics that we currently have at our disposal have no opportunity for intercession by human will, right? I mean, we are a collection of particles governed by laws that you can write down and fit on a t-shirt. And those laws don't at any point in the evolution of the particles say, hey, can you tell me now what to do, persons, right? Normally, the intuitive definition is things could have been different, and I could have made a choice for things to turn out differently. And if that's your definition of free will, does that resonate with your perspective of free will? Then I don't see any way to square that with the laws of physics, because anything that you do is your particles executing some kind of motion, and the motion of your particles in your brain and your body have no opportunity to allow you as a conscious being to direct them. What force could possibly that direction come from? Is it the electromagnetic force? Well, that one we understand from Maxwell. Is it the gravitational force? We understand that one from Einstein. Is it the nuclear forces? Those we understand from the standard model of particle physics. What force could you possibly exert on your particles that goes against or goes beyond those that emerge from the equations of physics?
Yeah, so the way that he understands this is it's not really the way that most people understand who we are as a human, right? It's very like it's broken down to the point where we're meaningless, right? If you think of us as just a collection of electrons and neutrons firing, we we are a collection of atoms, sure, but these atoms form something, right? There's something there. The consciousness is there. That can't really be, at least to my knowledge, that can't be explained by physics,
Right.
or can it?
And
What do
you're right. Yeah. So many things, man. It's it feels like an agenda. And I'm not gonna lie. I got sucked up in it, man. And it's not like I don't believe that way either, but I'm a materialist. I'll admit I've got a little bit of a blind spot. I'm a materialist. I have to shared my stuff I had happen. If it didn't happen to me, I couldn't believe it because it wouldn't. I didn't experience it, right? I have to feel it, touch it, see it, smell it, all those things, measure it, this, that, and the other. And these guys sent us down this hole. But what does that allow us to do? It allows us to replace meaning with some tyrannical rule-based overlord of what you should do as a human because that's what we deemed humanity should do. And you're like, but who deems that? The social contract between two people deem that relationship. And then the social contract between those two people and another, and those three and another, and those 5 and those 15, and those 22 and those 36 people. That's how it works. And to your point, it's like it it can't just be globs of meat. Because like dogs don't think about tomorrow. They do bury a bone. That might be the only thing is because they know they can't finish it, but it's not like if they could probably finish it, they'd finish it right there, right? Like it's not like done whatever. It's like instinctually stored or something, right? We actually look to the future, plan and think. And it's frustrating because I think this leads to meaning. And I'm a pro-choice guy to an extent. But I could see how this reductionist makes it easy to be like, look, it could have been a murder. You don't even know what your kid was going to be. It was going to be whatever it was going to be. Even if you wanted to, no matter how you raised it, no matter how you fed it and did whatever, it was going to be what it was going to be. So it's worthless. So just don't even start it. Don't even start that process.
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I mean?
the clump of cells argument, right? This it wasn't a
Yeah.
baby, it was just a clump of cells. And
Right.
okay, maybe that is technically true, but then you can say the same thing about a living human being, fully grown adult. I'm just a collection of cells. So who cares? And I think you're right. It's maybe a ploy, maybe consciously or unconsciously, but a ploy to reduce humans to just matter. And again, that could be technically true, but if we do,
I mean,
we
they're
do
not
have
mutually
consciousness.
exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Like they can both be true. Like, okay, we're meats and clumps, and at a point, this consciousness thing is an emergent property from the meat of clump.
Yes.
So it gains momentum just like any complex system. So I don't know how that doesn't defy physics. Like it is physics. Systems get more complex over time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
biological
and
systems.
how do all these cells know how to work together and form this form? I mean, I guess it's in DNA, right? But do we really understand exactly how that happens? I don't think so.
And to say that at the Big Bang, everything was going to happen the way it was. Now, I actually don't necessarily disagree that because in a quantum world, in my opinion, anything that can possibly happen must happen. Not should. It's just a probabilistic potential, right? It's these whatever infinite outcomes and they're probabilistic outcomes, right? That doesn't change free will either because it's just makes it random as to the outcome, still not free. It's determined, just random determined, right? So it's the roll of the dice thing. But when I look at this stuff, man, and It gets so crazy because, like, okay, I have to share this because this is what happened. I wake up in the morning and I shared some psychic stuff with you. I wake up in the morning, I start a fight with my girlfriend. First thing in the morning, Sunday morning, I get up and I wake up and I look over to her. I go, if our house burns down and we didn't move, that's going to end our relationship. Like I started, like literally started there. It was weird. Okay. I'm not going to lie. I don't know what came over me, but I felt a little possessed at the time. Cause basically we were talking about, fire insurance being taken away and stuff. And like Phoenix, there's something weird going on that I've had voices in my head screaming me to leave. The same ones that told me to come here are the ones telling me to get the heck out. And I'm defying that. And it's really hurting me. Okay. Now it's my own thing. So I share this with my girlfriend, but it had to be that morning. I'm like, if we burn down, I swear it won't go well for us. You know what I mean? Like literally.
Well, yeah.
That night I go out to walk and I shared the video with you. South Mountain's on fire. It's a half mile from my house, man. And it caught on fire that night. I can tell you 100. I stormed upstairs and I go, baby, come down here. Check this out. And I showed her, I'm like, had to be why it was so in my mind at that time. And I know that sounds crazy, but the day her dog died, the morning I was awake with her, like in the morning before she left, tears were shooting out of my face. And I was lucid going, something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. Something's not good. Like I just knew, like I can't explain it, but I look back, right? So the psychic phenomena, if it's determined, that might explain why you can see an outcome. Right? So maybe it is determined. If one can actually see an outcome, maybe that's determined, but it could also be quanta because it'd be probabilistic and whatever too. Right?
Yeah. We could go back to that Libet experiment where they recognized that people's brain activity was happening before they chose to make a motion, right? So there could be something there. I think, well, let's get into some of the counter arguments because we've got Jordan Peterson here and he's going to talk about it in a way that I think is really interesting and plays into that. The first
which one? The first one? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me download them real quick if you just want to set them up real quick.
Yeah. So he does believe in free will. He says that we are not just deterministic clockwork machines is the phrase that he uses. And I kind of agree, although I'm not 100% I'm on board with his argument.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Okay. So yeah, to your point, Peterson's smart. He's well thought out. And I think he's got, he's got that new book where we who wrestle with God or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's pretty good because I do think he's trying to address it from a different perspective. But once again, I think we talked about it. I shared it with you is I don't know if everyone can conceptualize these things the way he can. Does that make sense? So yes, it will be for his audience, but remember, we need to live between each other and amongst each other or whatever. You want to live in your high-walled castle? Like, where are you going to live? You're going to live among us if you're so here? You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in an elitist way, but I just mean it in like if people can't grasp the concept, if not everyone can, then not everyone can like move forward with like a unified idea. Right? Like, and that's really where God kind of does the meaning, right? That was the unified idea. And I don't want government to replace God. I don't want to serve anyone, So Peterson won, right? Go ahead and tell me your thoughts on that before I hit that.
Yeah. So like, as you were talking about, the concept of time kind of comes into question here because you're talking about precognition, kind of experiencing or thinking about things well before they happen. And to understand that, do we fully understand the concept of time as exactly linear? And it can only be, there's no like going back and forth. There's no time travel. And that I don't know.
Right.
But
And we can
he's
talk
gonna
about the
he's gonna
physics of
talk
time
about
travel. Technically, you can move forward in time because you could park next to a black hole. Time slows for you and speeds for everyone else. Come back. Everyone's 100 years in the future. Sounds weird, but you can do that. Anyway. All right. Peterson 1, sir.
yeah.
The future is unpredictable, technically speaking. The universe is not deterministic, technically speaking. There isn't any dispute about that. You're not a clockwork machine. And the reason that we know that is because a clockwork machine can't compute the transforming horizon of the future. So now whether or not that means we have free will, that's a different issue, because it's not exactly obvious what free will means, and it's obvious as well that to some degree our will is bounded. But it certainly does mean that whatever you are, you're not a deterministic clockwork machine. And whatever the universe is, it's not a deterministic clockwork machine.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
that's kind of
Before
setting
we
it up.
continue, we
Mhm.
got about 20 minutes before we call it a day. I'm the one always holding us behind, so I want to make sure we're on the clock, sir. 20
Mhm.
minutes. T minus 20.
All right. Yeah. So he talks about, this is setting it up, right? But he does talk about time, how kind of like, because we can think about the future and probably alter the future based on our actions, that's kind of an indicator of some kind of free will. And he does admit that it's bounded. So I think that is probably not in question, right? We all agree to some level we can't control things. But let's keep going, unless you had some other thoughts.
Yeah, very quickly is to your point. We talked about reflection, changing actions, changing future actions. So it kind of makes sense.
And so it does look like as we implement our actions, the horizon of possibility collapses into a deterministic actuality. But the farther out into the future we look, the less determined our perceptions and actions necessarily become. So,
Can you
and we
pause
don't,
there?
Yeah.
well, I'll leave it at that.
Let me
So,
pause there.
Yeah, so I think that's very interesting. He says that as we come toward the present, everything looks deterministic, right? And we can only live in the present. We cannot live in the future. So that kind of blows my mind a little bit. Like, you can look out into the future and things are unclear. We don't know what's happening out there. But as we come into the present, everything kind of looks like it's predetermined, because everything that happened in the past leading up to this puts you in this moment. And like I said, there's no going back and forth. There's no time travel. There's no rewinding and do-overs. We're kind of stuck. And so if you're only looking at the present moment, yes, maybe it is deterministic.
Yeah, I thought this was one of the most compelling clips of the entire piece of the talk about it, because it makes me think about weather, the butterfly effect, all these types of things, right? Cause and effect too. A week out, you can't tell me what the weather's going to be exactly like, right? The wind speed, the temperature, the pressure, the humidity. You're not going to tell me exactly. But as you get closer to that, the 5-day forecast, yeah, the 5th day, probably pretty accurate. But as you got closer to the day of, right, it comes into being as the weather day that is. So it is all ethereal here till it actually becomes weather, right? And you go, yeah, well, the high pressure caused the clouds to do this and the jet stream blew this way, and that's causal.
Mhm.
But it's not deterministic till it actually exactly becomes a storm or becomes a thing, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
all right, you can keep
I
it going.
continue. All right.
I can give you a contrary vision that's associated with what I talked about tonight. You're not a clockwork machine. What are you? You're a visionary. So, and to understand that, you have to reconfigure how you think about the world, because most of you undoubtedly think like scientific materialists, at least in part. You're probably not very good at thinking like scientific materialists, but because very few people think scientifically in a very thorough manner, but still the basic architecture of your thought is going to be of that not nature. And so you think there are objects in the world, and you think that you react to the objects and in a deterministic way, and none of that's true. You don't see objects that are objective. You see patterns that are functional. And they don't determine your action because you're not a clockwork machine driven by stimulus.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'll read Aaron's comment here. He says, deterministic means something is inevitable or happens as a result of a cause. It can also refer to a philosophical belief that all events are predetermined. So we're kind of mostly talking about the philosophical belief here, right? But yes, I mean, everything happens as a result of a cause. I don't think that is debatable. I
Right,
guess there could
causality
be
is the
some,
thing, right?
yeah,
I mean,
there could be
causality is the
something
thing.
completely random, maybe.
And that's the thing is when it clearly you can't do something that the universe won't allow, right? Like there are certain there's physics, there's there's laws of physics and gravity and all these things that are bound, right? If the gravitational pull was a little too light, we'd all fly apart. If it was a little too strong, we'd all be sucked up into one ball, right? Like, the fine tuning of the universe kind of stuff, whatever you want to talk about, you're like, okay, but maybe we tuned it. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean it was determined. It had to be it changed over time. Evolution, one of those things where it changes, like things evolve. It's natural selection after the evolution, because the evolution's like a mutation, right? So for example, a gorilla has black eyes, and the second white pupil starts going, or white goes around it, you can tell the gorilla's attention. So that allowed mating to be better because you could tell that the person was looking at you when they were looking at you. That really worked for trying to mate, right? So obviously that got bred out. But some things, like for example, we talked about lactose intolerance, that one still exists because we didn't need it. Because actually lactose intolerance was actually how it is. The non-lactose intolerance is actually the mutation, which because it allowed us to drink milk later in life. It's kind of a weird thing. So anyway, so there's all these genetics, biologics, and everything. But man, to really tell me that it's causal, sure, but all determined, it's tough. It's a tough one.
Yeah, Justin says if there is free will on some level, regardless of how small it may be, then things cannot be determined. So, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and once again, it is the butterfly effect. It's like if I clap my hand right now, and I just chose to do that, and it creates just enough reverberation to do something else in the room. Cool. Did I do that? I mean, but is that free will? It's like that is assuming every conversation we had. It's kind of like the thing about the monkey. If you give a monkey an infinite amount of time, they'll type out every work of Shakespeare, like letter by letter. And you're like, yeah, I mean, I guess. Like, I don't really know what that, you know what I mean? Like, really? Yeah. But is that really like that's deterministic in some way too? I don't know.
Yeah, but so I think Peterson's point here is that yes, it looks deterministic now in the present, but it's because of some choices or actions that happened in the past. And so what we do now can affect the future. I think there is some room, maybe not big, but there is some room for your free will to make those changes and affect your future self. Like Peterson often talks about you as a collection of selves. So you're thinking about you tomorrow. You're thinking about you in 10 days. You're thinking about you in 5 years. So when you look at where you are now, you're like, well, I can't change that, but I'm going to take this tiny step and make it a little bit better for me in the future. So I think at that level, there is some small amount of free will. And like Justin says, if there's some, that means that we do not live in a deterministic world.
And in Peterson's defense, if you had young man after young man approach you and say, someone handed me a video of yours and it changed my life. Like, Peterson affects change in people's lives. Okay. Determined or not, deterministic or not, I don't see how he couldn't see it as the desire to be a better person.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way I think that he could rationalize him being there. Imagine him being like, oh, you're coming to me because you were going to come to me anyway. Like, yeah, this was supposed to happen, I guess. So we'll just play through the motions. Like,
Yeah.
it does really evoke the meaning issue, because meaning or lack thereof would compel me to act slightly, even the most minute way, differently.
Mm-hmm.
For example. So on Peterson's defense, man, he's seen people will themselves out of some shit, or at least it seems like that's what it was, right? Like these young men turn their lives around after watching his videos. So I can imagine him feeling much more that you are in control of your change and your future.
Yeah.
Just
And
'cause
we
he's
may not know exactly what the impetus for change was, but there was something, you know? And at some
Right.
point,
And I think it's
think you do.
reflection.
Yeah.
You know?
At some point, I think you do have a choice to make.
Yeah, for
And
sure,
even
man.
if that's not 100% true, I think that's still the way that I want to live, you know? That's still the way I want to understand it, because, like you said, that's the meaning in life. And if we don't have that, then yeah, maybe we just sit around on the couch and do nothing and be lazy fat slobs, you know?
Mhm. And I mean, not, you know, to your point as well, you have a future person that you're setting up for their life too, right? Or helping to. So like you have that extra pressure on you that someone like myself who doesn't have that has less of that pressure even, you know?
Yeah.
So like imagine no meaning, no offspring or no legacy, like, and look at the current, look at some current like culture stuff that have been a result of that, right? Like there's a nihilistic look in the world. And I was gonna cut this clip, but he's like, if fatalism, how do we not go to fatalism? Because if it's all predetermined, we're gonna not care to a point, because there's gonna be a point where not enough of us are gonna care, and it's gonna create, you know, like an inverted care spiral, like a death spiral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that without meaning, that's a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do one more clip. The what has to change.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had
So
Peterson
just
3. Can I play Peterson 3 while I pull up what has to
sure.
change, or you
Yeah,
want to
we'll finish
talk
this
about it?
off. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I was trying to
And then
save some
we'll
time, but it's still good.
all right. It'll take me a second to download. So
That's all of that's wrong. Imagine what you confront when you wake up in the morning. You might say, well, I wake up in my bedroom and I confront the furniture. It's like,
I love that
sort
he's
of like thinking
exasperated about
that,
his own hypothetical
imagine you're at a
example.
theater and you're watching a play,
I
and
know, it's great, isn't it?
the stage is set with the props, and the actors come on and they say their lines, and you say, the props caused that. Like, none of that's even vaguely true. And you know, the props in a play aren't objects either. They're facilitators of the symbolic message of the play. And I think you can say that about the objects in the actual world. They're not objects, they're facilitators of the symbolic meaning of the play. And then what do you confront when you wake up in the morning? Well, it's not the damn furniture in your room. It's the possibility of the day. No, the possibility of the day makes itself manifest to you, and it presents itself as a problem. How will I interact with what's transforming in front of me in a manner that will bring about the desired end? And you might be very bad at that, which just means you're impulsive, and after the realization of very short-term visions, and so you're more hedonistic and immature in your visionary orientation, or you're sophisticated and you integrate the possibility that makes itself manifest to you with a higher order and sophisticated vision. And then you grapple or wrestle with that emergent possibility to realize it. And by doing that, you participate in the creation of the world.
All right, I'm gonna go right to this next clip, buddy.
Just on
I know we
that.
got some time. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just by him saying that objects are kind of players in the world, they're facilitators. I forget exactly what he said. of your reality. I mean, to me, that's more of an argument against free will. Like, these objects are doing something to you; they're acting on you to force you to do something. But then he says, yeah, you have the choice of how to interpret that. So yeah, that's where I was like, I'm not 100% sure about his argument, but maybe I'm not quite understanding.
I don't think he has a complete argument yet.
Yeah.
And in a Peterson way, I don't know if he will, because he's not a fence sitter. He
just
likes
rambles.
to bring the ideas and make them harmonize, if that makes sense. Like, what is God? Well, what do you mean by God? It's like, dude, don't dance around this shit. Like, there's people who like think there's a God, right?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You know, I got God in my ear talking about me here, and I've got God in my left ear talking about that. No, and but I love just the way he thinks, because he does dance with the ideas of it. But like, to your point, I wanted to bring up non-player character. We talked about simulation theory. Simulation theory is part of this deterministic stuff too.
Yes.
It's not any different, right? Because like, it's like, dude, we got non-player characters who are just going through the motions. Now, maybe will happens at some level within the non-player character. I would argue it would be a consciousness, which certain animals have certain levels, certain don't. Plants have a consciousness, but not in that same way. It's a difference, like an intelligence, like a general intelligence or whatever. So like, it's compelling, man. It's interesting to think about. So
yeah, that gets back to the whole thing about what is a human. And yeah, you could get into simulation theory. Are we just these little building blocks of electricity that are happening in someone else's world? Who knows? But yeah, just for the sake of time, we'll maybe come back to simulation theory in another one. But
let's do one of those, because that'd be fun for me.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Free Guy? Have you seen Free Guy?
Yeah, it's good.
I thought that was very well done.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, all right, let me hit this Alex O'Connor.
This is the last one. This is kind of what would happen if we do accept that free will does not exist.
What has to happen? Here we go.
Now, in the same way that yesterday I was hungry, and then today I sit down with a biologist who explains to me in precise detail exactly why I feel hunger, how it works, how it's connected to the body, I still feel hungry, and I still go and get the food. I mean, sure, I can sort of, on a meta level now, reflect more on what I'm doing here, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm hungry. So in the same way, whatever was motivating me yesterday to get out of bed is still motivating me to get out of bed today. The only difference is I recognize that I didn't control that motivation. And so I guess what I ask, I mean, people often say to me is, well, you don't believe in free will, but you don't act like you don't believe in free will. You act like you believe in free will all the time. And you just alluded to that there. And in your book, you say, I find it very difficult to live as if this is actually true. But what does it mean to live as if it's true? It might change the way that you morally assess people, but even then, does it really? I mean, you used the word rotten a moment ago. You said if someone cuts you off in traffic, you're tempted to say, well, what a rotten person. But what does the word rotten mean? It just means that it's sort of gone bad. I mean, an apple can go rotten, but that doesn't mean you're making a moral assessment of it. It just means that you're looking at its behaviors and you're saying that in relation to what I want it to do for me, it's gone rotten. And so, what really has to change just by adopting a belief in determinism and living as if that were true?
Alex is so smart.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, so what really has to change? I think, like he was saying, you still kind of act as if you have free will. You're still reasoning through things. Whether or not that was directly in your control, it kind of doesn't matter, I think.
Yeah, and we should talk about it, because we're coming up here against it, but like accountability and responsibility. Mm-hmm. You're still accountable for the shell that did the thing. And in a society that we've agreed that certain things done on certain other people are unacceptable, that's not acceptable. What do? You give them, we put them on that island. What was that? Escape? What was the one with Ray Liotta, where he was like on that island where they put all the criminals on and then they just fought it out? You know what I mean? It just had their little warfare or whatever. And you're like, No Escape, I think it was called. Something like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Justin says, if things are truly determined, our actions are just a result of infinite history, so we don't have free will. How can we trust our own reasoning? To reason means to choose between ideas.
Yeah.
Last one of the day before your head explodes.
I'll push back on that a little bit. Just we reason all the time, but it may be after the fact. So yes, maybe we do reason and then make a decision, but also we make snap decisions and then reason why we did that, and we may be completely wrong about why the decision we make of why. But overall, I think yes, the lack of predictability of humans individually, I would say that is a tell for free will. It's not perfect, but maybe it just means that other people don't act the same way we would expect. But we can look at people's history and then they change. And there are a million billion factors why that might be, but we don't really know. And if you just think about your life, you probably recognize that you have made some decision before, you know?
Yeah. Now, I think this has utility. And I think the one place it has utility is you didn't earn it. Keep fighting. Like, don't act like you did all this. I think that's never a bad lesson, to act like you didn't do all this. That it is privileged and you are blessed to be able, like, dude, we're sitting here at night on computers with cool like cameras and stuff and talking miles away and broadcasting to the world. You know what I mean? Like, how cool is this that we can do this? How lucky we are that we can do this. Like, reflection on that is huge. And like, yeah, sometimes you can look at yourself and go, I am proud of doing this. And pride isn't a bad thing. It definitely has portions of it. But this hubris that we're getting to, this entitlement of some sort, is like, you didn't deserve, like, you had to make it happen still.
Yeah.
Look, if you don't act, I guarantee, if you laid in bed all day, I know nothing's going to happen, determined or not, right? Like, regardless of whether it's determined that nothing will happen, it won't. So you might as well do it. It's kind of Pascal's wager for free will, right? Like, act as if God exists is Pascal's wager. This is act as if free will exists, because if we don't, we lose utility.
Yeah.
So with that, let me ask you this. I think you might have a religious faith. So if there's a Pascal's wager for free will, act as if, then should we follow the Pascal's wager of God existing?
Ooh, that might need a whole episode, man.
That's a whole separate episode. I think your head's going to explode. But you understand the question, right? It's like, these are really interesting things. Is like, okay, well, it's right to act like free will exists because whatever, but like the God stuff does have the meaning and some other stuff and some other utility to it. If you can but can you filter out the other stuff that doesn't have the best utility, right? Same thing. It almost becomes the same argument. What do we filter out? What do we make culture, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just to wrap it up, yeah, I find pretty much all the arguments lacking in one way or another, but I'm probably more moved towards the fact that free will is less than we thought. You know, I feel like maybe we should do this again in a year or so and see if we've changed it all. There are a few topics we didn't get to hit on, like the political implications, how people think about politics is very relevant to this. But I think if things were so deterministic, we'd be better able to predict the future, and we can't. So I think that's one way that this falls short.
Yeah. 2 points on that. The political thing was, when you keep talking about, is exactly right. Tribalism, you pick a side, so you're all the things that side is, and you have to rationalize them all, right? That's less free willish. That's a lot more tribal and just done, right? The other point that you were making about, what was the last point you just made? Oh, so good.
Predicting the future. I think if
perhaps the machine's just so complex.
Yeah.
That we just don't have the means to measure or whatever to predict it that way. I hate to do it. I mean, I hate to say it, but that might be a thing, right? That is the butterfly effect. Maybe it's so complex of a machine that we just don't know all the atoms that are moving. But it even with quanta though, because it's still probabilistic, it still is limited, right? Within this whatever box that they're painting. So it does remove some of the will. But like to your point, the more I delve into this is like determinism sounds more accurate, and free will within that with reflection changes the determinist thing, but it was all like in motion anyway in some way. But
Yeah.
man, like I said, you've had personal struggles. I know I've had personal struggles that I've forced myself to do with pain, knowing, and it wasn't necessarily knowing what that it would be better on the other side. I just knew I had to do something that wasn't this anymore. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like desperation. So like maybe desperation's not free will either, that because like my body got tingly or whatever and like had to freak out to stop, I don't know. It's like it is a forever complex thing, man. But thank you everyone for joining. We've had
Thanks for
over
watching,
50
guys.
people today. So
Awesome.
Aaron, Aaron, Justin, let's see, anyone else
Zach.
make some comment? Zach was up there. Looking through. Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, this has been a consciously unmasked. I almost call it unconsciously masked earlier. Like I almost totally flipped it wrong. But Jason, please share your stuff before you call it a day, man. I know you're up against it.
Yeah, go follow me on X at Drop the Mask Pod. Follow my YouTube channel here. And locals. I've got some extra bonus content on locals. dropthemaskpod.locals.com. It's free. You can support me if you like, but no pressure. Go check it out.
All right. And if you do support him, actually, you know what? This is what we're going to do. We should all give him $5 today because it was supposed to happen. So
you
just
have
do
no
it.
choice. Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting. Hopefully we'll get to play this back and look at it. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know. It's so complex
It's complex. Like I said before we started, I could spend a year preparing for this kind of conversation. So yeah, we'll be doing some more deep dives, talking about similar things, and maybe we'll come back to it at some point.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much. What are we looking at? Maybe 2-3 weeks, sir? Something like that. Just general.
Maybe a couple weeks. Maybe we can do next week. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think we got the extraordinary gentleman next week. The 5 of us.
A couple weeks then.
So I'll let you guys know. Yes. So next week we should have the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I'm sorry, the Extra League of Ordinary Gentlemen. I apologize. We were just ordinary gentlemen. But really Monday, this past Monday, we were not able to do Provoke Week 6. So we're going to do Provoke Week 6 and 7 this Monday. Yeah. All right. 6 and 7. But we got a special guest. Dave DeCamp will be with us. So that's going to be awesome. You had Kyle Anzalone on. I have not had the pleasure of Kyle. Have you had Dave on yet?
I haven't. I was just laughing at Justin's comment. You can't plan a future talk about free will. That's great.
How can we have a future talk about free will? It was supposed to happen anyway. But the thing is, it's good that you gave us a year because I'm going to start listening to everything right now to catch up because I do need that year that you're talking about. Because we got kind of caught up in Sapolsky and O'Connor and this and that, but there's Hume and there are gazillions of people that talk about consciousness and will. We didn't even, we barely scraped the surface. So we're just grateful that everyone joined us. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Next time it'll be on Jason's channel and he'll be streaming with us. So we're going to make it happen. Everybody have a good night. Take care.